Carlos, congratulations once again. And, first off, I just want to start with the human element. You talked a lot about the human element. We saw how emotional you got. You told the great story about when you heard the news that you were going to be the Mets manager. How have those emotions hit you over the last couple of weeks as you've kind of let it sink in that this is a goal you finally accomplished? You're a big league manager.
Yeah, it's hard to describe, to be honest with you. We've been through a lot, especially the last week. And when I got the news, it was kind of like, all right, we celebrated a little bit, but then it was back to work. What's next? I got on the phone and started calling David and some of the people because we got a lot of work to do. But yeah, it was something that I sat back and for a couple of minutes and kind of realized that, this is a dream come true. It's something that I've worked all my life, and here I am, and I'm excited.
What is that process of getting to work when you get on the phone with David and you start thinking through all the things that you have to accomplish in this first off season? What does that process look like for you?
Yeah, first thing was putting together a coaching staff. You start calling people and listening to recommendations and, going back and forth with David in the front office and, contacting people too, And then the most important is reaching out to players. Something that, like I said, the very next day I started reaching out to players, and it's been great. I'm all about connection, relationships, because they got to get to know me. I'm not the only one trying to get to know them, but I got to earn their respect. And that's, the first thing that I got to do this off season is hopefully I'll get the opportunity to meet with them face to face, but I'm planning on just having at least a couple of conversations before we get to St. Lucie and get going. Have you spoken to any of the players yet? And if so, any of the conversations stand out in particular? Yeah, all of them. Lindor, the one with Pete Alonso, I felt like we were on the phone for like 45 minutes and felt like we could have kept going. Nimmo, not too long ago, he was on a vacation trip, but sharp guys, smart, but at the end of the day, good human beings. I talked to Edwin Diaz. He was in Puerto Rico, and obviously can't wait to continue to have these conversations. And yeah, there's a lot more, a lot of texts. They don't know the number yet, so I'm still waiting to hear back from them. But like I said, I'm expecting to reach out and have these initial conversations here in the near future. One of the first things you said in the press conference was that David Stearns and the front office put you to work during the interview process. Can you describe exactly what type of work, what type of conversations you guys had as you ultimately came together on this marriage? Yeah, it wasn't easy, very thorough process, a lot of Zoom calls that first round, meeting one-on-one. I remember one of the first day was 6 hours of just Zoom, 1 hour with David, 1 hour with the next guy in, and it was one after another, and I was just getting out of my office, quick break, and then back in again. Before it was 3 o'clock, and then advancing to the second round, and I had to come here to New York and meet with a lot of different people, groups of 4 or 5 from each department. It was an intense process, but the one that I enjoyed, and then obviously meeting with Steve at the end was pretty good too. Carlos, you've got a long day still ahead of you, so I'll just leave you with a couple of quick hits on the actual on-field product and your thoughts, philosophies as a manager. Number one, how do you view the DH role? Is your preference to have one solidified DH or to use that as a spot to rotate guys through and get them off their feet? Well, ideally, it's one of those that you could have that flexibility to rotate guys. But again, we're a long ways away to see what the team's going to look like. But you're asking me, versatility is important. I mean, not a secret that the way the game's going now, that the youth and the athleticism and keeping that spot is important. But I also understand we got people on our roster that. We'll see what transpires here in the near future, But I am excited with the roster, with the players, and I can't wait to get going. What about from a rotation perspective? There's been a lot more of a movement towards maybe not just a strict 5-man rotation, mixing in that 6th guy. Do you like the traditional 5-man rotation, or are you, open to more pushing towards a 6-man? Well, I'm open for anything, and I think a lot goes into making a decision like this, like the flexibility of your bullpen, how the bullpen is going to be constructed. You're going to have guys that are going to give you multiple innings, that are going to be able to give you pitches, guys that are going to be able to go back to back. Those type of things come into play when you're making a decision, whether you're going to go traditional 5-man rotation or a 6-man. So there's a lot of conversations, and that's part of working together, right? Asking people's opinion and getting the players involved, because that's important too. Like, I'm a big believer that you have to empower players and making them be a part of the decision making too. At the end of the day, we will make that decision, but I always like to get that feedback from them.
Okay, and finally, when it comes to empowering players, one of the things that's going to be clear about this group this year is going to be an infusion of young players. Certainly some came up last season, but with the moves made at the deadline, there are guys that are right around the corner. How do you view bringing along young, talented players and giving them a level of responsibility when they're up here?
Yeah, I mean, starts with expectations from day one, right? But I think it starts with the leadership group that's already in place with the roster, right? Making that environment a welcome environment, especially for some of these young players that are going to come up at some point. Some of them might be with us from out of spring training, but there's a lot of good players there. And what I'm going to do is just encourage them to spend time to get to know each other. I want the Lindors, I want the Alonsos to spend time with the Acuñas and guys like that. And at the same time, I want those younger players to pick their brains, and that's part of the process, the early process here in the off season. And once we get going in spring training, those relationships are already on the way.
Carlos, I know you've got, like I said, much more to do. So thank you so much for a few extra minutes. We'll see you soon.